let's move on to the next question. Next question. Biden set forth a plan to strengthen worker organization and unions in part of the platform he ran on. What are your thoughts on his plans? Is there any substance there? Do you have hope that this plan will yield some results for unions and the working middle class?
I swear I didn't write that one.
Are you sure about that? Because this seems like
I didn't write that question.
This seems like a beach ball sized softball.
Right.
But do I have hope? Yeah, I really do have hope. And let me start with day one. So this is where my excitement gets. My excitement gets that on day one, Joe Biden gave Peter Robb, the general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board, till 5 o'clock to resign. And when he refused to resign, he was fired. That tells me that Joe Biden has done more to strengthen labor unions than any president in my lifetime. Because Peter Robb is one of those guys, and his deputy, Ms. Stork, they have been the worst arbiters of the National Labor Relations Board, coming up with some of the most anti-union decisions, anti-worker decisions over these last 4 years. So his departure tells me there's an opportunity for people to organize. There's an opportunity for the National Labor Relations Board to actually do its mission, which is to be the fair arbiter of people, how people organize and enforce the law of the land with union organizing and the workplace. What we had under Robb was a guy who had both hands planted on the steering wheel driving right down the corporate highway. This is a guy who, and there's symbolism here for me, because Peter Robb was one of the guys who was back behind Reagan's firing of the Patco workers. He was one of the attorneys who basically argued for the air traffic controllers back in 81 to get fired. And not just be fired, but permanently barred from any federal employment ever again. It wasn't just enough that you lose your job. You can never reapply. You can never work anywhere else. They blacklisted them. So for me to have him enjoy the wonders of the things that he's been promoting, like at-will employment, seeing him fired, for me is a good thing. That sends a message. Now, Joe Biden's endorsement of the PRO Act, for me, is another one of those huge moments, because if we can undo some of the scourge of Taft-Hartley, we can end these idiotic right-to-work laws and give people truly an opportunity to join and form unions through the card check process instead of this long-term harassing secret ballot process that gives employers ample opportunity to hold captive audience meetings, ample opportunity to bring single workers into 5-6 people ganging up on them in management. There's an opportunity for us to grow. If you go back and you look at how my grandparents' generation organized under the original National Labor Relations Act, it was by card check. You got 51% of the 50% plus one to sign the card. You began negotiating. The company and the union hammered out an agreement. At a certain point, they came to an agreement, or people went on strike. And that's okay too. At some point, you've got to give workers some bit of power to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions. Understand the law of the land as it was intended in the Wagner Act of 1935, the NLRA, doesn't give employers one paragraph, not one sentence, not one word of rights. Because they understood from the beginning, employers have all the rights. There was a master-servant relationship, and they understood that. So what the law did is gave workers some bit of footing to be able to negotiate. And we used the federal government to encourage that, because guess what? Back during the 30s, there were ugly, brutal, violent, bloody strikes. There were people getting beaten and killed on picket lines because they had the audacity to say, you know what? My kids should be able to eat. We should be able to live in a house. We should be able to exist off of the labor that we do and off of the wealth that we create. And things were so bad that the government said, yeah, we think workers should have some rights. So for me, Joe Biden saying we want to protect the right to organize, the PRO Act, is huge. But beyond that, his use of regulatory oversight, putting somebody at the NLRB who's going to actually fulfill that mission is of great hope to me. And I could go on for much, much, much longer, But the fact that he's going to move on a $15 an hour minimum wage within the next couple of weeks, hopefully, tells me that he understands that workers need a raise and that we all need a raise. And he's going to fight for that. And we're going to rebuild that prosperous middle class that our grandparents left for us. Brett, before I go on for too long, do you have a thought on it?
Yeah, I don't have your ability to speak on this subject, with the same encyclopedic knowledge, but I will add this little nugget to the conversation. We seem to have been operating for most of my life. I'm 46 years old now. We seem to be operating for most of my life on the assumption that if the business does well, then the workers will do well. If there's a lot of profit, then therefore workers will do better. And there is not and has never been any correlation between these two numbers. Throughout all of labor history, workers have only ever gotten what they demanded. So taking away workers' rights to organize and join hands and fight for their due, which is pretty much what we've been doing since Reagan, is chopping away at workers' rights to organize. And of course, wages have dropped pretty much right in line with those moments where the corporate world has had victories over working people. So Joe's focus on allowing people to organize and getting people, back into a union structure can only be a good thing for working people.
And I've said this before, Joe Biden was not my first choice. He wasn't my second choice. But he is right now our president, and I'm thrilled that he is. Because on this issue, I think Joe is going to mandate that we do allow unions to grow and workers to democratize their workplaces. And with all federal contracting, he's going to use the power of that. But more importantly, as we move to this green economy, as we move to these jobs that are going to replace the pipeline jobs, he has promised that he has pledged that those are going to be, if workers want them, they're going to be union jobs. And I know the polling says, 60 million people tomorrow would join a union if they could. What's stopping them? Well, 70 years of ossificated labor law that has swung the pendulum of power to the worker, to the supervisors, to the management people, to the bosses, and taken that power away from workers. This is Joe Biden, hopefully with the passage of the PRO Act, giving some of that back. And then it's up to us. It's not him. He's just giving us the tools to it. We then got to go do the hard work of organizing ourselves and then doing the even harder work of fighting for those benefits. I said a minute ago, we have a rich and bloody and violent history of labor in this country. We didn't get a benevolent employer didn't grant us the 8-hour day. A benevolent employer didn't grant us a minimum wage, didn't grant us weekends, vacations, pensions. None of that stuff was granted out of the goodness of someone's heart. They were fought for. Generations of workers before us fought for them. And sadly, it's only taken really one generation for most of it to be eroded. It's going to be our turn to stand up, fight for something, and leave our kids something better. So I hope that answers the question. Again, if you have any thoughts, any questions, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got some other things that we need to get to.